Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. A couple of days ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, I did a video on the trends that I see emerging in the watch world in 2021. That got me thinking, who have been the trendsetters up till now? This is a video on the brands I think have had the biggest impact on the watch community, the watch hobby, the watch industry over the last, I'm going to say 10 to 20-ish years. Okay, so what are the brands that have most influenced the direction of watches over the last 10, maybe 20 years? I'm going to start with a group of brands that have really impacted on watch design and the look of watches. And I'm going to start in a surprising place, and that is Hublot. Hublot is often overlooked for their impact on watch design, watch making, because we get so wrapped up in everything else. We get so wrapped up in the look of the watches and the price of the watches and the way they're marketed. And what we lose sight of is that probably no other brand has done more to influence the materiality of watches than Hublot. If you like the idea of wearing a rubber strap with your Daytona, you can thank Hublot for that. If you're into ceramics or sapphire, if you like the idea of scratch-resistant gold, all of that came from Hublot. Even if they didn't invent it, and in many cases they didn't, they were the company that have taken any number of technologies, materials technologies, out of the laboratory, out of the multi-million-dollar watch, and brought it to an industrial scale where it can later flow on to the rest of the watch world. A lot of people regard what Hublot do as gimmicky, but the sheer amount of what they've introduced that has stuck, I think, means that they've actually had way more influence than people give them credit for. The next brand on my list is Longines. I don't think any other brand can be given the credit or the blame for the current neo-retro vibe in the community more than Longines. I was close with Tudor, and their Black Bay has undoubtedly had a lot of impact. But if you look at what Longines have done, it spans lots of different genres, lots of different time periods. They've brought back watches from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. They have really popularized, at least in the West, the idea of neo-retro. And I think, for better or worse, love it or hate it, that is at Longines' feet. Okay, so next up I've got Grand Seiko and their effect on what we think a dial can and should be. There have been other brands that have put emphasis into dial work, saying it can be more than just a flat tablet. But no brand has done more than Grand Seiko to pick that up and run with it and give us such a huge variety of colors, textures, ideas, symbols, and have really made us start thinking about why more brands don't do this. So I think Grand Seiko have definitely impacted the market there. Next, I've got Rolex. Of course I do, but not their watches. Rolex have been doing incremental design really on their core watch brands, their core watch properties, since the 1970s. So in a sense, Rolex is as influenced by Rolex of the 70s as anyone else. No, what Rolex have changed in the industry over the last 20 years when it comes to watches is bracelets. No other company has done more than Rolex to take bracelets from being just an accessory to being part of the watch. No other company has done as much as Rolex to come up with new ways of... Rolex have basically defined what is a good bracelet in terms of fit, feel, finish, shaping, and adjustability. Now every brand is compared to what Rolex does. An interesting byproduct of that is I have a suspicion that Rolex's influence goes even further than that. Many people would imagine that the cue goes something like, people love bracelets, Rolex makes good bracelets, therefore people love Rolex. I suspect Rolex is so powerful that flow actually works the other way round. People love Rolex, Rolex makes good bracelets, therefore people love bracelets. That is how powerful Rolex is, and that is how they have shaped the world, the watch world, when it comes to bracelets. Okay, next, now we're getting out of brands that have influenced watches and watch design, and now we're getting more into brands that have influenced the watch industry. And I'm going to start with FP Journe. They're not the best, they're not the brightest, although they are very, very good and very, very bright. But I don't think any brand has done more than FP Journe to champion the cause of the indies. Everything we're seeing now with independence and that gathering really starts with FP Journe and pressing beyond what they could have been. And I think it's because of FP Journe now that your average watch person knows about brands like Moser and Groenfield and all of these other independents that are really starting to get our attention. Okay, sticking with who's influenced the industry, and I'm going to come back to Rolex here. Over the last 10 to 20 years, no brand has done more to influence how a watch company should control their catalog, their inventory, and their distribution. For 15 to 20 years, we have been telling brands, the media have been telling brands, and brands have known themselves because of Rolex's success that they need to get on top of catalog, inventory, and distribution. They have wanted to copy Rolex for decades. Rolex has provided that model. Now, with COVID, they got the opportunity to take that leap. And now you see every brand with waiting lists, without discounts, and pushing forward. There's a lot of people who think that this is going to pass. Post-COVID, everyone's going to go back to what they did in the past. I think the influence of Rolex and their business model is such that we will not be going back to massive overproduction and out of control distribution. Rolex and what they have shown can be achieved through that discipline will have changed the market, I think, forever. Okay, next up in affecting the industry, we have Omega. What Omega have shown over the last decade and a half to 2 decades is the power of the special and limited edition. By taking basically 2 watches, the Seamaster and the Speedmaster, Omega have produced literally dozens, if not over 100 different variations of those watches, created buzz, created content, created things to sell out of 2 lines, and not had any of the normal inventory or distribution problems. Every other company has seen that and has grabbed that, and everything we see now with Seiko and all these other brands doing limited and special editions, I think could all be laid at Omega's door. Next I have Seiko, but not Seiko the brand, but Seiko the movement maker. Over the last 2 decades or so, the Seiko Movement NH35 has probably been responsible for the growth of an entire market segment. It is difficult to imagine the microbrand segment without the NH35. Maybe another brand, another movement might have grabbed it and run in the absence of Seiko making the NH35 available. Maybe it'd be the Miyota 8000. Maybe some other movement would have been there. But they didn't. It was the Seiko NH35 and NH36 that was made available to everyone, and that I think probably had more to do with the growth and success of the microbrand sector than anyone else. Okay, some of you might have noticed I was very careful with my words introducing this. I didn't say which watch brands had the most impact on watch collecting. My next two brands are not, strictly speaking, watch brands. The first brand to impact watch collecting more than any other is Instagram. Released in 2010, part of Facebook in 2012. Nothing has done more than Instagram to take watches from the geeky little corners of forums and weird magazines that hang out at the back with the dolls and model trains than Instagram. Instagram is the vehicle that took our little hobby out of the shadows and brought it into the light for everyone to see. For better or worse, I don't think any brand has done more to put watches and the watch collecting hobby in the public eye, to expand the horizons of who can see this, than Instagram. Okay, so having named Instagram, the next one would probably be obvious. It's going to be Hadinki. Formed in 2008 and going public with a $150 million odd investment last year, now beginning life with a one-man band in 2008, now employing best part of 100 people. I don't think anyone has done more than Hadinki to bridge that gap. Just as Instagram was bringing people into watches that hadn't come up through the forums, Hadinki was there to catch them and then give them a media outlet, a community, a retailer that would bring in people that weren't in the watch world, that weren't in it up to their elbows and could only speak to other watch collectors. Hadinki are the ones who took all of those people coming into the hobby through places like Instagram, gave them a home, introduced them to the hobby, and made them part of us. So I think from that point of view, Hadinki has fundamentally affected the watch community. So that was it. There was a little bit of a cheat in there. I never actually said they were all going to be watch brands. Who do you think I missed? There were some things I left out. I was unable to find someone to blame for the whole in-house movement thing. So whoever it was that caused that got off today. Likewise, I did not include the Apple Watch. I don't know how that's going to play out in the long run. So I'm going to let that one go for a little bit. I have a secret suspicion that the smartwatch trend will actually die fairly soon. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches, and I'll see you later. Bye.